We're back. Season 8, Episode 13, The Mean Six. This is the episode in which Chrysalis comes back for revenge, and it turns into a comedy episode. This episode sucks. Moving on. Alright, the next one we're covering. Let's see, what is the next episode? Let's see here. A Matter of Principles, which I know nothing about, of course. So I suppose we'll find that out then. No, I suppose I should actually talk about this. Alright. Wow, I do not have a lot of notes for this episode. That's not good. Okay. So, the episode starts off pretty strong. We have this photographer showing up. The ladybug cutie mark. It's kind of neat. And it's like, hi, I'm Chrysalis. And I do actually like that little bit of foreshadowing. As per usual with this franchise, they do a good job of showing and then telling. Because anyone paying attention can pretty much tell immediately that that's Chrysalis. And then she reveals herself as Chrysalis still in the cold open, which is a good hook. So, good hook. I'm with it. Cool. This then segues into Chrysalis absolutely losing it as she explains her entire plan to the trees. I wonder if she's not quite there after her last defeat, if she hasn't really been holding up quite as well, you know? It's probably having some issues there. Hi, Dream Whisperer. Hi, Act. Yeah, yeah, she's losing a little bit. She also mentions that the elements of harmony are the most powerful weapon in Equestria. Not sure I agree with that, but I guess as far as artifacts go, I don't know, it's interesting to note. What I do find interesting is that she wants to rule on high as Sultan! Yeah, no, what I do find interesting is that it's a way to do exposition. You're absolutely right, Lord Hermon. It is a method by which to explain what everyone present already knows because she's losing it. It's not good exposition, and it's not great exposition, but it's yawn-worthy. It's not actually bad exposition. It doesn't drift into that territory, so I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one, game. Or, I mean, show. Episode. Whatever. Okay. So the Mean Six are made out of trees. I don't have anything else to add to that. It is interesting because what we have here is a hypothetically extremely powerful bit of magic. She has a bit of the actual individual, she has a picture of them, she has an image of their cutie mark, and she has the base matter, in this case the trees. Not too shabby, and they do come out as versions of them, but opposite versions of them. Or inverse, if you prefer, but I think opposite fits a little bit better here. So, okay, that's cool. Here's an interesting point. Most of these, 5 of them, actually, are pretty much the ones we saw with Discord. You know, they are... And they're, of course, exaggerated Flanders Eye. But again, the Discord thing. The one I find interesting is Twilight. Because we never actually saw a Twilight in opposited Discord person, right? Instead, Twilight just became despondent back in that episode. Here, we see what opposite Twilight is actually like. Which I like for several reasons. But the biggest one is that her biggest trait by far is ambition. Now... I'm a firm believer in the idea that ambition is not evil. I have to. I'm an extremely ambitious person. However, the fact of the matter is, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Twilight is not ambitious. She really isn't. She doesn't want to rule on high as Sultan. She does not want to have the commanding status that she has. She does not want to be the sovereign of Equestria, or to use her princess status, or anything. Instead... she just kind of wants to have her own little quiet life and her own little thing, and she wants to be nice and organized about it, but she doesn't really want to stretch out and do great things, whether in terms of conquest or in terms of action. And I just thought that was an interesting bit of characterization, and it's probably one of the better parts of the episode. By the way, I didn't like this episode that much. I'm just going to go and open with that. I wasn't joking earlier, but let's move into it piece by piece. So the Mean Six obviously look completely different. Let's see, we've got different eye color, different mane presentation, different cutie marks, which are still only a little bit different, but they're still different. So you could tell immediately at a glance that they're different, but what you can really tell is that they act completely differently. I just want to preface all that because that's going to be important coming up. I do also want to, however, praise this episode for having extremely good visual storytelling. If you pay attention, they vary the palette, the number of colors, and the brightness of each scene This takes planning and thought, and they do a wonderful job with this. All of the scenes with just the mean six have a dimmer palette, duller colors, and it's darker. And of course, the colors, palette, and dark. I guess that's it. Just the three things. Anything with the main six is brighter, more colors, and a different palette, a more varied palette, right? So, cool. I'm with it. A less dim palette. I forget what the term is for that. So, this visual storytelling thing is constant throughout this episode. And as the episode is bouncing around, it uses that. Every single scene, and I was paying attention to this because this is fantastic. I am super not muted. Every scene that was doing this, where they would cross over a little bit. So, like, for example, you'd see one of the main six and two of the mean six. They come here. Oh, muted. Gotcha. Thank you. Just say, I'm not muted. I double checked just in case, because I always double check that. Yes, the colors are muted. Like if there's two bright and one dark, then the scene is about 2/3 bright and 1/3 dark. And this continues throughout the entire work, and it constantly changes and varies that based on what specific characters are on screen. That takes planning and work, and I absolutely want to give praise for that, because this episode is extremely well executed. Whoever wrote this episode, which is Michael Vogel, by the way, and whoever storyboarded this episode, which I have no idea who that is, worked overtime on this one. The pacing and flow of this episode is fantastic. It is a constant, wonderful shift in between these interacting with them, which makes them interact with them, and which interact with them. And there had to have been like a literal map as they were mapping out where each pony was in relation to the others, so they could constantly be intermixing until it got to the point where they were just literally crossing over each other constantly. Yeah, the structure of this episode is phenomenal. It's one of the most well-constructed episodes I have seen on this show. I wish the plot didn't piss me off so damn much, but nevertheless, that is very impressive. Anyways, then we see Starlight, who hates camping. The more I see of her, the more I see me in her, and it's really sad about that. Or more I see her. The more I see of her, the more that she's me, I guess is a better way to phrase that, because I'm not a big fan of camping. And not because of the camping itself, it's pretty much entirely because of the bugs. Death to bugs. Anyways, I'm not saying I'm secretly villainous, but if I ever take over the world, I'm going to end that sentence there. There's a nice transition, obviously they have the visual stuff. I do like, there's a nice little tidbit where Rarity says, oh no, I'm not going to actually bring a bunch of stuff because she's an experienced camper now, which is not only accurate, but also a continuity counter. We're almost up to 300 now. Because she has been camping for however many years it's been at this point, because who knows how long it's been. I mean, having a calendar in a show like this is just insanity. So that's cool. By the time they did the second transition, I stopped taking the episode seriously, because I realized that this was a comedy episode, not a threat episode. No, that's fine. Okay, sure, I'm with that. There's nothing wrong with a comedy episode. Why would you bring Chrysalis back for a comedy episode? I actually know the answer to that question. You do that because you're trying to bring a villain down. So there's degrees of tiering when it comes to villains in all of fiction. This is true for games, books, movies, etc. If you ever played Kingdom Hearts 1, this is a very minor spoiler, you'll know that Maleficent is a fairly high-tier villain there. She is considered to be a serious threat. In Kingdom Hearts 2, she is comic relief. Actually presented as comic relief. Now, usually fiction does this on purpose as a way to balance out or establish or change the dynamics of other characters. In Kingdom Hearts 2, they were specifically bringing Maleficent and the Heartless down so that the Nobodies in Organization 13 could be pushed up, and they could be perceived as the serious threat. Then we have 358, which pushes them down another step, and so forth and so on. Yeah, most fiction does this. What is not true is every fiction doing this on purpose, because sometimes it just kind of happens, either because of drifting or because of whatever. And yeah, Voyager doing this with the Borg is a perfect example. If you happen to look at a specific... I don't want to sound negative, Lord Harriman, so I'm going to ask you in as neutral a term as I can how you could possibly, A, not see the fact that this is constructed as a comedy episode, and B, feel the threat, because there's no threat here whatsoever. Anyways, so she's brought down, and let me give a direct example, because I like to give evidence. I don't like just to say this. So, The best example I could give for how this is a comedy episode is the big, horribly evil villain who is super powerful and dangerous, can't even keep her own minions corralled together. Ha ha, isn't it funny how much trouble she's having trying to get them out of her hair? This is a classic example of comedy. As I've said, I've analyzed comedy before, so let's go ahead and give this specific example. This is juxtaposition comedy. This is Darth Vader carrying around baby Luke in his arms while he's running around doing evil stuff. Now, obviously, you probably haven't seen this before. But the reason I bring this up, I've actually seen a comic that did exactly this thing. And it's just Vader being like... And like the panel's up here, and he's like, "You will tell me where the stuff is." And the person just can't take him seriously because he's holding a baby in his arm. Juxtaposition. That's type of comedy. It's specifically the big evil doom thing who is incapable of keeping the kids together, right? It's also a way to deflate the moment to reduce the amount of stress or anxiety a child might be watching for a particular thing. It's one of the reasons the term Saturday morning cartoon villain exists, is because the specific definition of a Saturday morning cartoon villain, in terms of tropes, is someone who is constantly being portrayed as partially funny, partially silly, or partially incompetent, specifically because of deliberate intent to make sure they don't scare the kids. No, I'm not making that up. You can look it up. Megatron is a perfect example of this. Now, I know there are certain versions of Megatron who are big and doomy and terrifying, but the Megatron from the G1 cartoons is the perfect example of this. He's this incompetent boob who constantly screws up and is actually being overwhelmed by his own minions more than his own actual enemies. To name just one example right off the top of my head. Cobra Commander is, of course, another example, and I could keep going, but you get the idea. Yeah, Silver Age Joker is another example of this. Not the Joker who's actually terrifying and horrible. So. Okay. Evil Twilight. Now, that would have been interesting, keeping Evil Twilight around. I'm actually a little sad we didn't get to keep Evil Twilight. I will admit the element that the tree reacting to the disharmony was interesting. I was actually hopeful it would do something really terrifying. Instead, it did something really gross, but I digress. I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, so comedy plot. Okay, cool, sure. Maybe it's not a comedy plot. I don't know. I'm not going to say that with definitiveness. But by my analysis, this is a comedy plot, and so I'm not going to lie or make that up. So that's my analysis. It doesn't make it actually true. Cool. There's this bit where Chrysalis says that the Tree of Harm... They wouldn't tell everybody where the most powerful weapon in Equestria is. I find this thing in its own right an interesting insight in Chrysalis's character, because of the fact that Chrysalis is so stupid. No, I'm kidding. Because of her mentality. It doesn't even occur to her that they would make this into a national monument. The Castle of the Sisters, the Tree of Harmony. Everybody knows what that friggin' thing is. So, it doesn't even occur to her to have looked into this and find out from anybody where it is and said, oh, we have to search the forest randomly to find it, because it would never actually occur to her to have just, asked for directions, which she could do as a shapeshifter. Now, Chrysalis not killing the main six while she was there, that actually makes perfect sense. Because she's not only losing her mind completely, but again, she wants revenge. So, okay, that tracks. And yeah, she is crazy. But my point is that this would be perfectly in character for Chrysalis even before, in my opinion. Because it would never actually occur to her, hi, Eon Dragon, hope your game goes well, that people wouldn't just try to give out the location of something that she considers to be a weapon. Because the Tree of Harmony is not a weapon. That's the whole point. But of course she doesn't know that because she can't even conceive of that. I've noticed this is a continuing trend in this season. This is, I think, the 5th time this has shown up so far. The old era versus the new era is, I think, what I'm going to call the theme of this season. The old way of thinking as personified by totally not Merlin and the principal dude, whose name I can't think of, Chancellor Naywinnie or something like that. The old way of thinking versus the new way of thinking, which is more about coordinating and cooperation and, friendship. Because this is showing up yet again in this very episode. I'm going to skip over one note real quick. I'm just going to skip over to speak of Chrysalis again, and to kind of tie into that theme of old versus new. You'll notice how Chrysalis has absolutely no leadership skills. This is once again in character for her. As we saw, the way that she ruled her hive was through deliberate starvation and intimidation and terror tactics. Now, we had a huge discussion about that. It was actually a brilliant part of her character, and we see it here, done for comedy, because she actually has no ability to control her minions other than by threatening to literally kill them. And even when she's doing that, mean Twilight is still plotting against her. Oh yeah, I mentioned a specific scene of comedy. So, you know, yeah, the password is rutabaga. That's a specific scene that goes back to that, you know, juxtaposition thing I mentioned, where she's like, I'm this big intimidating villain, but she can't even control her own minions that she just built. So, comedy. Evil Rarity's expressions as she greedily consumes the stuff is probably the overall best scene in the entire episode. I don't know what else to say about that. I actually rewound it and watched it a second time because it's just, wow. Someone was working overtime on designing different expressions for her as she was going through the pile of stuff. So it's right about here. Oh no, it absolutely was, Ross. I agree with you completely. I still hate it, but you know. It's right about here that I realized that the mean six are exactly as stupid as the main six are, because the mean six never actually figure out that the main six are here. Despite everything. And some distant part of me was hoping, vaguely, that Starlight would be the one to have a brain in this episode, because nobody has a brain in this episode, and actually pick up on what's going on. Instead, she just goes along with it just like everyone else. Okay. This is when I praise the pace and the flow. Each scene gets slightly more complex and slightly more intermingled between the two. I've mentioned the visual stylings. I mentioned the patterning and storyboarding. It really is very, very well constructed. I just have to praise that again. Because I hate this goddamn episode. It has two tropes I absolutely despise. Technically three, if you want to really stretch it. The first is the obvious. It's the Star Trek trope. You know the one. I've talked about it constantly in the Trek stuff, and I hate it. Hi. Hi, I'm the Lore Runner, and I was just having a cup of coffee here. Oh, is that some black licorice? Oh, that's delicious. Oh, I love this. Anyways, so I was just thinking that y'all can go screw yourselves because I hate everyone and I'm stupid. I hate that crap. I hate that crap so damn much. Not the person acting out of character. The fact that nobody catches on to it. We've actually done this before in MLP, which is irritating in its own right, but I hate this in all of fiction. And again, I point to Trek as my perfect example of this, because Trek, especially TNG, just loves to hammer this button for some reason. Where there's a character who's acting completely, obviously out of character, and it takes them forever to even notice there's something different, and sometimes they don't notice at all. There is actually an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where Beverly Crusher, who has known Jean-Luc Picard for in the decades range, not only doesn't pick up on the fact that he's been replaced by an alien, but never picks up on that fact. That is not an exaggeration or me making something up. I don't remember the name of the episode, please forgive me. It's the one where they dump Picard into this prison room and they replace his version on... It's a dumb episode. I hate that goddamn stuff so goddamn much. It has never stopped pissing me off. It has never stopped irritating me, because the only reason it can function is either if you presume that they have absolutely no idea who their friends are, which I think by this point in time they have not earned such a thing, or they're carrying the idiot ball as hard as they possibly can. That's the third trope I mentioned in brief earlier. So we've got something that really irritates me, combined with something that really irritates me. But then we've got the second trope. Now, this one's not as bad, because it can be done properly. It's just, you know, it's not as hard to do properly as the other one. That is the trope of we have a total wacky comical misunderstanding which leads to an argument. You know the one. I accidentally do this and oh my god, I didn't realize, and then we start arguing and yelling over it. This one can be done well. Like I said, this one isn't nearly as bad. This episode does not get credit for that, because this one is done badly. The core idea here is that they all supremely, firmly believe that their friends they have known for however many years it's been at this point, and known as well as they do, are totally acting in the manner that they were presented in, which was, of course, somewhat cartoonishly exaggerated to be opposite, probably because it's a cartoon show, but you get the point. So they start yelling and irritating and blah, blah, blah. You know what doubly irritates me on top of all this? I like the idea of the Aesop. No, really. It's one they've done before on MLP. It's something that I agree with, because the way that this works is your friends can still irritate you. Right? Right? Even my closest friends, of which I have 3, have irritated me before. And I them. That's life. That's how that works. It doesn't mean we stop being friends. It means that that happens periodically, and it's just kind of part of friendship. Part of being a friend is having an argument and then continuing to be a friend afterwards, which is also something this show has covered before. So I'm kind of with the idea. I am. I feel like they absolutely do not earn it in this case. They have this big speech where they all get together and Twilight gives a speech and they're all happy and good, and that's neat. Okay, that's cool. But I'm completely de-invested in this scene because it didn't earn so much as 1 second of it, in my opinion. Now, now this is going to be funny because, who said it in chat? Someone said it in chat. Imperial Star Destroyer and I apparently completely disagree on this point, which is funny because IS Destroyer and I disagree on a lot of stuff, but that's cool. Because that's how that works, right? We disagree, but we're still cool, right? Like the episode says. We are still cool. I shouldn't presume that, I just realized. I think we're still cool. Just leave that there. Okay, we're still cool. Cool. So, I was hoping... I don't want a big confrontation, but I was hoping for a confrontation, or at least... Actually, confrontation is the wrong word, because I don't care if they fight. That's whatever. It doesn't mean anything to me. What I wanted is a revelation. I wanted them to realize, oh, it wasn't my friends all along. I wanted the truth to get out. And so when the Mean Six start going down to the camp, I was like, this is it. This is the scene. The Mean Six are going to be like, aha! And the Mean Six are going to be like, what? Oh, it makes so much sense. And then it'll all be explained. And then the Mean Six rush past them to get the tree and then die horrifically. And I was with that, except they weren't there. So there's no revelation. They never figure out the truth. And that's the final nail in the coffin. If you're paying attention, that's 4 tropes that I dislike. It's when the characters never find out the truth about something like this. Now, yes, I know, that can be done well as well. You notice I'm doing these in kind of an escalation sort of thing. The doesn't understand that they're being affected, especially in a setting where magic and science exists. So Star Trek or MLP. This irritates me the most. Then we have the argument based on misunderstanding, which irritates me a little bit, but not as much. Then the idiot ball, which is kind of a separate thing, so it's why it's less. And then the fact that they never find out the truth, which irritates me the least of all, but nevertheless is something that irritates me. So, that sucks. Then they go encounter the tree. So, this is something I think Lord Harrimont mentioned. As they're going to the tree and they hit the thing, and the elements of harmony start flashing black. That actually caught my attention pretty hard. The idea that the tree was reacting to disharmony really caught me, and I thought for just a moment they might be going for a status quo change, which is something they do on this show. Be weird to do in a mid-season thing, but you never know, we're trying out new things. And if the tree of harmony became the tree of disharmony, or stopped spreading harmony, or something, that would be an interesting concept. Instead, the tree grabs them and rots them alive. Actually, I guess reverts them might be a better way to phrase it, because they go back into being chunks of tree. They go back into the bark they were made of. Which... wow. That's... Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, it looks pretty horrible. It actively looked pretty horrible. It was messed up. Curious if there is a version of the death that is still visible, because yeah, they look like they're melting. Now, the intended effect, which is more obvious in hindsight, is that they were reverting to being chunks of lumber. Here it is. I found it. Yeah, in the uncensored version, it looks more obvious like they are literally melting to death. But in the actual version, it looks a little bit more like they are shriveling up. Like they're being desiccated alive, and then they turn into chunks of lumber. And then the episode ends and they never learn the truth. The end. I hate this episode. And you know why? Because if it wasn't so damned well constructed, I would just label this a lamentation and move on. I can't. This is not a lamentation. So, arguments for pulling this up from Blue. Go. It is way too well constructed. I hate the core elements of this. I will never watch this episode again. I hate the core elements of the episode. I hate all 4 tropes that it leans upon. I hate the fact that it doesn't mean anything. It's basically a filler episode. I do like the fact that it is the kind of episode... Let me walk that back. It is the kind of episode that would have worked better in Season 1 and worse in Season 1. Because in Season 1, you know, they would have been like, oh my god. And I would have believed they don't know each other enough to not pick up on it. But on the other hand, they know each other so well that they go back to being friends pretty much immediately, which wouldn't have worked back in Season 1. So... Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that, Tallfire, because you're absolutely right. It is interesting, for various reasons, that Twilight is, in terms of just straight-up stats, in terms of numbers, Twilight is stronger than Chrysalis. That makes sense to me, really, because she is. What's more interesting is that the duplicate that she made was also similarly strong. Because that's either badly written, which I would believe because most of this episode is badly written, or indicative of just how powerful her ability to create clones is. Because that implies that there's rules magic at play here, that she is literally making a duplicate of Twilight who is stronger than her. If you don't understand the significance of that, usually in settings that have magic, you can't make something stronger than yourself. It doesn't work that way. Because it still has to come from you to some extent or another. This implies that Chrysalis can make something that can overpower her, which is interesting. I also do kind of like the idea of Chrysalis, who is deranged and unhinged. One of the most dangerous kind of villains is the one who is no longer playing by the rules, after all. It's actually one of the primary reasons why the Joker is considered so terrifying, is because he just kind of bypasses the rules. So we can see how Chrysalis can absolutely be considered interesting here and dangerous. I just don't buy it. Alright, you have made some good arguments. I will go ahead and lift it up to a green. I will acquiesce, most strongly because of the fact that it is a very well-constructed episode. It is. I can't argue it. I can't deny it. Pluses for the construction and the bones and the visual storytelling, the color usage, and the animations on rarity. Pluses, pluses, pluses. I need to look something up really quick. Give me 1 second. Ah, Derby Racers. This is by Michael Vogel. No, right, Ross? Michael Vogel has given us a huge variety of episodes. In fact, Michael Vogel has given us a blue, a green, yellows, oranges, reds, and a purple. So that's the whole gamut. That's the whole structure there. So that's funny. What is an arc counter? Well, an arc counter, whereas an episode doesn't get a continuity counter, it's more like a conclusion or a part of a significant arc. Speaking of which, do we think this counts? I would say no, because it's not really part of any arc. There's no arc involved here. However, the fact that Chrysalis gets away at the end does imply that we will have a Chrysalis arc episode in the future. But yeah, I would say this is not actually part of the arc. This is the filler episode that reminds us that Chrysalis is still out there. Which is fine, by the way. Nothing against that as a concept. Every now and again, you need to remind the people that characters are still existent. I always feel bad about looking at episodes like this, because it's just, ugh. I almost wish this was a Season 1 episode. You know why? Because then I would just label it a blue and move on, because it wouldn't have the amazing animation or construction. It'd be easier, you know? Ah, whatever. Well, moving on. What is our next episode? What's next? Something about principles, I think? Hang on. There we go. From Nicole Debut, which I always pronounce wrong, A Matter of Principles is the next episode, which I know nothing about. So we'll see about that one in about 25 minutes.